Story 1. The Amityville Nightmare. My name is George Lutz, and in December 1975, my family and I stepped into a nightmare that would haunt us forever. The house at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York, seemed like a steal at $80,000. A big, beautiful Dutch colonial with a boathouse. It was perfect for me, my wife Kathleen, and my 3 kids, Daniel, Christopher, and Melissa. We knew about the tragedy that happened there a year earlier, the one that left 6 people dead. But we were practical folks. A house doesn't hold grudges, right? That's what I told myself as we unpacked our boxes. I was wrong. Day 1, the chill sets in. The first day was hectic. All boxes and laughter as the kids ran through the rooms, claiming their spaces. But there was a moment, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, when I felt it. A coldness that didn't belong. Not the crisp December air, but something deeper, like the house itself was exhaling frost. Kathleen noticed it too. Her smile faltered as she zipped up her sweater in the living room. "Drafty old place," she muttered, but her eyes darted to the windows, all tightly shut. That night, I woke up around 3:15 a.m. The house was silent, but the silence was wrong. Too heavy, like it was pressing down on my chest. I checked on the kids, expecting to find a window left open, but their rooms were sealed tight. Melissa, our youngest, was curled up under her blanket, muttering in her sleep. I couldn't make out the words, but they sounded urgent, almost pleading. I brushed it off as a bad dream and went back to bed. Sleep didn't come easy. Day 3. The smell. By the 3rd day, we were settling in, or trying to. That's when the smell started. It wasn't constant, just a whiff here and there, like something rotting in the walls. I checked the basement, the attic, even the garbage cans outside. Nothing. Kathleen thought it might be the pipes, so I called a plumber. He found no leaks, no clogs, no reason for the stench. "Maybe it's just an old house thing," he said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes as he left. That evening, Daniel came downstairs, pale as a sheet. "Dad, there's something in my room," he whispered. He was 12, too old for imaginary monsters, but his hands were shaking. He said he'd seen a shadow move across his wall, not like a car's headlights, but like something with shape, with purpose. I went up with him, flashlight in hand, and searched every corner. Nothing. But as I turned to leave, the door to his closet creaked open on its own. Just an inch, but enough to make my skin crawl. Day 7. The eyes. A week in, the house started to feel like it was watching us. I'd catch glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision. Dark shapes darting around corners, gone when I turned to look. Kathleen said she felt it too, like eyes boring into her back when she cooked dinner. The kids were quieter now, sticking close to us instead of exploring. Melissa stopped sleeping in her room, insisting on staying with us. She said she saw a pig outside her window, staring at her with red eyes that glowed like embers. I checked the yard the next morning. No tracks, no signs of any animal, but I couldn't shake the image of those eyes. That night, I heard it. A voice, low and guttural, like it was scraped from the bottom of a well. "Get out." It came from nowhere and everywhere, vibrating through the walls. Kathleen shot up in bed, her face drained of color. "You heard that, didn't you?" she whispered. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. We didn't sleep again that night. Day 12. The slime. The house was fighting us now. On the 12th day, I found it in the hallway, a greenish-black slime oozing down the wall, thick and glistening. It smelled like the stench we'd been chasing, but worse, like decay and something chemical. I grabbed a rag to wipe it away, but it kept seeping back as if the wall was bleeding. Kathleen gagged and ran outside, the kids trailing her. I stayed, scrubbing until my hands were raw, but the slime wouldn't stop. By evening, it was gone, like it had never been there. The kids were too. That night, Christopher woke us, screaming. He said his bed had lifted off the floor, hovering inches above the ground before crashing back down. I wanted to call it a nightmare, but the legs of his bed were splintered, the wood cracked like it had been dropped from a height. We moved him to the living room, but none of us felt safe anymore. Day 18, the Hooves. By the 18th day, we were barely holding it together. The cold spots were constant now, rooms turning arctic in seconds, our breath fogging in the air. Doors slammed shut on their own, windows rattled like they were trying to break free. Then came the footprints. I found them in the snow outside our bedroom window, large, deep, like hooves, with claw marks that looked almost deliberate. I followed them to the edge of the yard where they stopped dead, as if whatever made them had vanished into thin air. That night, I saw it. I froze. A face at the window, pale, eyeless sockets glowing red, lips twisted into a snarl. It was paralyzed, my heart pounding so hard I thought it had burst. Then it was gone, and the window was shattered, glass scattered across the floor. Kathleen screamed when she saw it, and the kids huddled together, sobbing. We didn't talk about it. We couldn't. Day 25, the breaking point. By day 25, the house was a prison. Furniture moved on its own, chairs sliding across the floor, tables tipping over. A small closet in the hallway flew open, its door hurtling down the corridor like it had been thrown. The voice was louder now, a constant growl demanding we leave. Get out, get out, get out. It followed us from room to room, relentless. Melissa stopped speaking. She'd sit for hours staring at the walls, her eyes glassy. Daniel and Christopher were angry, snapping at each other, at us. Kathleen was a ghost of herself, her hands trembling as she tried to keep us fed, keep us together. I was losing my grip, jumping at every sound, every shadow. We were falling apart, and the house knew it. Day 28, the escape. On January 14th, 1976, we broke. It started with a sound, a deafening crash from the second floor, like the roof had caved in. I ran upstairs expecting to find rubble, but the hallway was empty, the air thick with that rotting stench. Then the walls pulsed, a low thrum that shook the floor under my feet. The voice roared, louder than ever. Get out now. We didn't think. We grabbed the kids and ran, leaving everything behind, clothes, furniture, memories. The cold bit at us as we piled into the car, but it was nothing compared to the chill of that house. I looked back as we sped away, half expecting to see those red eyes in the windows. The house stood silent, dark, like it was waiting. We never went back. The things we saw, the things we felt, they're with us still. People call it a hoax, say we made it all up. But I know what I saw. I know what we lived through. That house at 112 Ocean Avenue isn't just a house. It's a trap. And we barely escaped. Story 2, The Enfield Haunting. My name is Janet Hodgson, and in the summer of 1977, when I was 11 years old, my life became a nightmare. It started in our small council house at 284 Green Street, Enfield, London. Me, my mum Peggy, My sister Margaret, who was 13, and my two brothers lived a quiet life until the knocking began. It was late August, a muggy night that clung to the skin. Margaret and I shared a bedroom, the walls thin and the air heavy with the day's heat. We were tucked into bed, the house silent except for the creak of the old floorboard settling. Then it came, knock, 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 sharp and deliberate, like someone rapping on the wall behind our heads. I froze, my heart thudding. Margaret sat up, her eyes wide in the dim light. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "Yeah," I said, my voice barely a breath. We waited, straining to hear. Knock, knock, knock. It came again, louder, from the other side of the room. I yanked the blanket up to my chin, my eyes darting to the shadows. There was no one there, just us. "Mom!" Margaret shouted, her voice trembling. Mum rushed in, her hair in curlers, her face pale. "What's going on?" she demanded. We told her about the knocks, and she frowned, checking the walls, the windows, even under the beds. Nothing. "It's just the pipes," she said, but her voice wavered. She didn't believe it any more than we did. The next night, it wasn't just knocks. I was drifting off when I heard a scraping sound, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. My eyes snapped open. In the moonlight filtering through the curtains, I saw it. The chest of drawers at the foot of our bed was moving, not fast, but steady, inching toward the door as if pushed by invisible hands. I screamed, and Margaret bolted upright, clutching my arm. Mum burst in again, this time with a flashlight. The chest stopped the moment her light hit it, but it was out of place, a good foot from where it should have been. "Girls, stop messing about," Mum snapped, but her hands were shaking. We swore we hadn't touched it. How could we? It was solid oak, heavier than both of us combined. Mum dragged it back to its spot, muttering about old houses and their quirks, but I saw the fear in her eyes. The next day we called the police. A constable came, a young man with a skeptical frown. He walked through the house, tapping walls, checking windows. Then, as he stood in our living room, a chair wobbled. Not a little shake, but a proper wobble, like it was trying to stand on its own. Then it slid, 6 inches across the floor, right in front of us. The constable's face went white. I can't explain that," he stammered, backing toward the door. He left without a report, saying it wasn't a police matter. Word spread fast. Neighbors started whispering, peering at our house from across the street. Some came over curious, offering to help. One night, Mrs. Burcombe from next door sat with us in the living room, her knitting needles clicking nervously. That's when the toys started moving. A plastic doll, one of my old ones, flew across the room and hit the wall with a thud. Mrs. Burcombe gasped, her needles clattering to the floor. "That wasn't the wind," she said, her voice barely audible. The knocks grew louder, more insistent, coming from every wall, sometimes the ceiling. At night, Margaret and I would huddle together, too scared to sleep. Mum started pinning our blankets around our legs, tucking them tight so they couldn't move. But one morning, we woke to find holes torn in them, ragged gashes like something had clawed through. Mum's face went gray when she saw them. "This isn't right," she whispered. By September, the house felt alive. Chairs tipped over when no one was near them. Books slid off shelves. One night, I woke to find my bed shaking, the frame rattling against the floor. Margaret screamed, pointing at me, "Janet, you're floating!" I looked down, my stomach lurching, My body was off the mattress, hovering a few inches above it. I flailed, grabbing the headboard, and crashed back down, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. The papers got wind of it. Reporters showed up, cameras flashing, asking questions about the Enfield haunting. They called it a poltergeist, a word I'd never heard before. It made my skin crawl. They wanted photos, proof. One night, a photographer caught me in midair, or so he said. I was just jumping on the bed, I swear, but the picture looked wrong, like I was suspended, my hair fanning out unnaturally. The headline screamed, "Girl levitates in haunted house." Mom hated it, but we couldn't stop them coming. Then came the voice. It was October, and the air was thick with autumn chill. Margaret and I were in the kitchen when it happened. My throat tightened, and a sound came out, not mine, not a girl's voice, but a deep, gravelly growl. "I'm Bill," it said. Margaret dropped her mug, tea splashing everywhere. Mum ran in, her eyes wild. "Who said that?" she demanded. I couldn't answer. My mouth moved, but it wasn't me. "Bill's here," the voice said again, rough and low, like it came from the bottom of a well. I clapped my hands over my mouth, shaking. It wasn't me. It couldn't be me. Investigators arrived, men in suits with tape recorders and notebooks. Maurice Gross and Guy Lyon Playfair from some society for psychical research spent hours in our house, setting up microphones, cameras, waiting for something to happen. They got it. The knocks came on cue, loud and rhythmic, like a code. Once, a broom fell over in the corner untouched. Another time, they recorded a whistling sound, sharp and eerie, looping through the air. Grossa said it was an entity. Playfair nodded, scribbling furiously. They believed us, or at least they believed something was here, but not everyone did. A magician named Ray Allen came, watched me closely. I was scared, so I messed about once, banging a broom on the ceiling when no one was looking. He caught me, his eyes narrowing. "Clever girl," he said, like it was all a game. Another man, Milburn Christopher, said my Bill voice was just ventriloquism, a trick I'd learned. I wanted to scream that I wasn't faking, not all of it, but who'd believe me? The cameras caught me bending a spoon once, too, when I thought they weren't rolling. Mum was furious, but I was just so tired, so scared. I wanted it to stop. The voice, Bill, kept talking. Sometimes it answered questions, gruff and short, like it was annoyed to be bothered. "Who are you?" Grouse would ask, his recorder humming. "Bill," it growled through me. "Dead." Once it laughed, a low, rumbling sound that made my skin prickle. Margaret started hearing it too, her voice dropping into that same gravelly tone. We'd sit there, staring at each other, both of us speaking in voices that weren't ours. The investigators said it was real, that something was using us to speak. But the skeptics just shook their heads, saying we were putting on a show. By 1978, the house was a circus. People came and went, neighbors, reporters, even a couple from America who stayed only a day. The noises never stopped. Bangs on the walls, furniture shifting, that horrible whistling. One night, a chair flipped over right in front of Gross, crashing onto its side. He jumped, his pen skittering across his notebook. "That's new," he muttered, but I could see he was rattled. The worst was at night. I'd wake up, my body jerking like something was pulling me. Once, I felt hands, cold, heavy hands, pressing on my chest, pinning me to the bed. I couldn't scream, couldn't move. Margaret said she saw shadows, tall and thin, standing at the foot of our beds. Mum started sleeping in our room, a kitchen knife under her pillow, though she never said what she thought she'd do with it. The blankets kept tearing. We'd wake to find them shredded, the edges frayed like something had chewed them. Mum stopped pinning them after a while. It didn't help. The knocks were constant now, following us from room to room. I'd hear them in my head sometimes, even when the house was quiet. Margaret said she did too. We stopped talking about it, afraid saying it out loud would make it worse. By 1979, I was exhausted. We all were. Mum's hair was streaked with gray she didn't have a year ago. Margaret barely spoke anymore, her eyes hollow. The investigators kept coming, but even they seemed worn out. Grossa said the entity was fading, that poltergeists burn out eventually. I didn't care what it was. I just wanted it gone. Then, one day in late 1979, it stopped. No knocks, no voices, no moving furniture. The house was still, like it was holding its breath. We waited, expecting it to start again, but it didn't. Mum packed our things, and we left Green Street for good. The new tenants never reported anything strange. I'm older now, but I still hear those knocks in my dreams. People ask me about it, reporters mostly, wanting to know if it was real. I don't know what to tell them. I know what I felt, what I saw. I know the fear in Mum's eyes, the way Margaret's hands shook. I know the voice that came out of me wasn't mine, but I also know they caught me faking once or twice, desperate to make it stop. Was it all a trick? I don't think so, but I'll never be sure. Story 3, The Shadows of Borley Rectory. My name is Clara Hensley, and I was 23 when I first set foot in Borley Rectory, that looming Gothic pile in the Essex countryside. It was June 1927, and I'd come to Borley as a governess for a family new to the village, a family who'd taken the rectory as their home, unaware of the whispers that clung to its walls. The villagers spoke of strange sights, a horse-drawn carriage that appeared from nowhere, a figure in white gliding through the mist. I dismissed it as folklore, the kind spun to scare children. But Borley had plans to teach me otherwise. The rectory was a beast of a house, its Victorian towers clawing at the sky, its windows like eyes that never blinked. Inside, the air was heavy, thick with dust and something I couldn't name. My room was on the 3rd floor, a narrow space with a single window overlooking the overgrown garden. That first night, I lay awake, listening to the house settle, or so I thought. Around midnight, a sharp clink echoed through the walls like glass breaking far below. I sat up, heart thudding. Silence followed, deep and unnatural. I told myself it was nothing, a rat perhaps, or a loose shutter. But sleep didn't come easily after that. The next morning I found the family's children, Eliza and Thomas, in the kitchen, wide-eyed. "Did you hear it?" Eliza whispered. "The bells?" I frowned. The servant bells in the house were old, their wires long since rusted. Yet Thomas nodded, insisting they'd rung in the night, a frantic jangle from the empty servants' quarters. I laughed it off, but unease curled in my stomach. That afternoon, while tidying the library, I heard footsteps overhead, slow, deliberate, pacing the attic. The children were outside, and the parents were in town. I gripped the bookshelf, my breath shallow, but the steps stopped as suddenly as they'd begun. Days turned to weeks, and Borley's strangeness grew. Objects vanished. My hairbrush, Eliza's doll, a brass candlestick, only to reappear in odd places. The cellar, the attic, behind a locked cupboard. One evening, as I read to the children by the fire, a cold draft swept through the room, though every window was shut. The flames flickered, and Thomas pointed to the wall, his face pale. "Clara, look." A shadow moved across the plaster, tall and shapeless, with no source to cast it. I ushered the children to bed, my voice steady, but my hands trembling. By August, the house felt alive, watchful. I began keeping a journal, noting every incident. One night, I woke to scratching, faint but insistent, coming from inside my bedroom wall. I pressed my ear to the plaster, and the sound stopped, replaced by a whisper so soft I couldn't make out the words. I stumbled back, my candle guttering. The next day, I found scratches on the wall, thin and jagged, like claw marks. I showed them to Mr. Carver, the groundskeeper, but he only shook his head. "Borley's got its ways," he muttered, refusing to step inside. The villagers' tales no longer seemed so fanciful. They spoke of a woman, her face hidden, seen drifting near the rectory's gates. One evening, as I walked the garden path at dusk, I saw her. She stood by the hedgerow, her form pale and indistinct, like fog taking shape. I froze, my breath catching. She turned, and though I couldn't see her face, I felt her gaze, cold, endless, pulling at something deep inside me. I ran back to the house, my journal shaking in my hands as I wrote, "She knows I'm here." In September, the phenomena escalated. Knocks rattled the walls at all hours, sharp and rhythmic like someone demanding entry. Stones fell from nowhere, skittering across the floorboards. One struck Eliza's arm, leaving a bruise. The children clung to me, refusing to sleep alone. I moved their beds to my room, but even there, Borley found us. One night, as moonlight spilled through the window, I saw writing on the wall, faint, scrawled in a hand not my own, "Marie Lair." I scrubbed it clean, my heart pounding, but the name lingered in my mind, unfamiliar yet heavy with meaning. By October, I was exhausted, my nerves frayed. The family planned to leave soon, unwilling to endure another winter in Borley, but the house seemed determined to keep us. One stormy night, the front door slammed open, though it had been locked. Rain poured in, and with it came a sound, a low, guttural hum like voices overlapping. I followed it to the cellar, my lantern flickering. The air down there was thick, the walls slick with damp. In the corner, I found a pile of ash, still warm, though no fire had been lit. Above it, scratched into the stone, were words, "Sunex amores." I didn't know what they meant, but they filled me with dread. The final night was February 27th, 1939. I'd stayed late, packing the last of the family's belongings. The children and their parents had gone to a nearby inn, leaving me alone in the rectory. The air was oppressive, the house unnaturally quiet. Around 9 o'clock, I smelled smoke. I ran through the halls calling out, but no one answered. In the library, flames licked the walls, spreading faster than any fire should. I grabbed my journal and fled, the heat searing my back. Outside, I watched Borley burn, its towers swallowed by fire. The villagers gathered, their faces grim. "It's done," Mr. Carver said, but his eyes held no relief. I left Borley the next day, my journal the only proof of what I'd seen. Years later, I heard the rectory had been razed, its stones scattered. They said it was all a hoax, tricks played by children, noises from an old boiler. But I know better. Borley wasn't just a house. It was something else, something that saw me, something that spoke. And though it burned, I still hear its whispers, calling me back to the shadows of Borley Rectory. Story 4. The Bell Witch. Haunting. My name is Kate, or so they came to call me. I am no mere ghost, no fleeting shadow. I am something older, something hungrier, born from the dark soil of this Tennessee land. In 1817, I found the Bell family, and they became mine. Their home, their fears, their very lives. I claimed them all. Let me tell you how it began, how I wove my presence into their days and nights, and how I made them tremble. It started quietly, as I always do. The Bells lived on a sprawling farm near Adams, a place of red clay and whispering pines. John Bell Sr., a stern man with a weathered face, worked the land with his wife Lucy and their children, Betsy, Joel, Richard, and the others. They were a sturdy folk, used to the hardships of frontier life, but they weren't ready for me. One evening in early 1817, John was out checking his fields. The sun had dipped low, painting the sky a sickly orange. That's when he saw me first, though he didn't know it was me. I took the shape of a creature, part dog, part rabbit, with eyes that glinted like wet stones. I crouched in the tall grass, watching him. His rifle trembled in his hands as he aimed, but I was gone before he could fire. He stumbled home, muttering about unnatural things. Oh, how I laughed, my voice a rustle in the wind. That same night, I visited Betsy. She was 11, with wide eyes and a curious heart. I appeared to her as a girl in a green dress, standing just beyond her window. "Come play," I whispered, my voice soft as a lullaby. She pressed her face to the glass, but when she blinked, I was gone. She told her mother the next morning, her voice quivering. Lucy brushed it off as a dream, but I saw the doubt in her eyes. Good. Doubt is where I thrive. I grew bolder. The Bell's slave Dean, a quiet man who worked the fields, became my next mark. As he walked home one moonless night, I followed him in the form of an enormous black dog. My paws made no sound, but my eyes burned red in the dark. He quickened his pace, his breath coming in sharp gasps. I let him feel my presence, let him hear the low growl that wasn't quite animal. When he reached the safety of his cabin, he barred the door, but I was already inside his mind, gnawing at his peace. Soon I brought my games to the Bell house itself. It began with sounds, knocks on the walls, sharp and insistent, like knuckles rapping bone. The family would freeze, their eyes dart into the doors, but no one was there. I'd wait until they settled, then strike again, louder, faster. Sometimes I dragged chains across the floor, the metal clanking in the dead of night. The children whimpered, clutching their blankets. Lucy tried to soothe them, but her hand shook. One night, I grew tired of mere noises. I wanted them to feel me. Betsy woke screaming, her hair tangled as if yanked by invisible hands. Red welts bloomed on her arms, pinched and scratched. Joel, her younger brother, swore he saw an unseen dog leap onto his bed, snarling before it vanished. The next morning, they found their cat, poor creature, skinned and lifeless on the porch. Lucy wept, but John's face hardened. He thought he could fight me. Foolish man. By summer, I was no longer content to hide. I gave myself a voice, deep and rough, like gravel scraped across iron. "I am Kate," I told them one night, my words echoing from the rafters. "I am here for you." They huddled together, their lanterns flickering. Betsy whispered, "Who's Kate?" I laughed, a sound that made the windows rattle. "Old Kate Batts's witch," I said, naming a neighbor they barely knew. Let them wonder, let them suspect. Fear loves a mystery. I began to speak often, answering their trembling questions. "What do you want?" John demanded once, his voice cracking. "You," I said simply, and I felt his heart stutter. I told them of things to come, storms that would ruin their crops, fevers that would strike their neighbors. Sometimes I lied just to see their faces twist. Other times, I spoke truths they didn't want to hear. I accused Betsy of sneaking sweets, Joel of shirking chores. I knew their secrets, and I used them like knives. But words weren't enough. I needed to touch them, to mark them. Betsy bore the worst of it. I pulled her hair until she screamed, pricked her skin with pins I conjured from nowhere. Once, I slapped her so hard her cheeks swelled for days. The boys weren't spared either. Richard woke with bruises shaped like fingers, Joel with scratches down his back. Lucy tried to protect them, but what could she do? I was everywhere, behind the walls, under the beds, in the air they breathed. The livestock began to die. Cows collapsed in the fields, their eyes rolled back. Pigs were found torn apart, as if by claws no beast could wield. John's prized horse went mad, galloping into the woods and never returning. The family's bedding was gnawed to shreds, their food spoiled overnight. I delighted in their despair, their whispered arguments about leaving. "You can't escape me," I told them, my voice curling like smoke. And they stayed, because fear roots deeper than hope. In 1819, a visitor came, a general, they said, a man of importance named Andrew Jackson. He arrived with his men, curious about the tales of Old Kate. I greeted them with a storm of knocks, a chorus of chains. His horses reared, refusing to approach the house. Jackson laughed at first, bold and brash, but when I whispered his name in the dark, his courage faltered. By dawn, he and his men were gone, their wagons rattling down the road. I howled after them, my laughter chasing them for miles. By 1820, I had grown ravenous. John Bell was my focus now. I'd always hated his stubbornness, his belief he could outlast me. I began to torment him most of all. I gnawed at his boots while he slept, left scratches on his face. His health faltered, fevers, pains he couldn't explain. "You're mine," I whispered each night, my voice in his ear. He grew gaunt, his eyes hollow. In December, I decided it was time. John fell ill, writhing in his bed. His breath came in gasps, his skin burning. I watched from the shadows, pleased. A vial appeared by his bedside, small and dark, filled with a liquid that reeked of death. I fed it to him, I crowed, my voice filling the house. Lucy found the vial and screamed, but it was too late. On December 20th, 1820, John Bell died, his body still, his face frozen in terror. At his funeral, I couldn't resist one final act. As the mourners gathered, I sang, a wild, mocking song that echoed through the trees. The crowd froze, their eyes wide. Some fled, others stood trembling. I left them with that memory, my voice a scar they'd carry forever. I lingered after John's death, but my hunger waned. Betsy grew older, the boys quieter. Lucy held the family together, but the house felt empty without John's defiance. In 1828, I returned briefly as I'd promised. I knocked on their walls, whispered in their dreams, but the fire was gone. They'd learned to live with fear, and that bored me. So I left, slipping back into the earth, the pines, the shadows. The Bell story became a tale told by firelight, a legend to scare children. They called me the Bell Witch, and I let them. Names mean nothing to me. I am the cold in your bones, the sound you can't place, the thing you see from the corner of your eye. I was here before the bells, and I'll be here long after, waiting, watching, hungry. Story 5. The Sallie House Horror. My name is Tony Pickman, and this is the story of the nightmare my family endured in the Sallie House. It was 1993 when Deborah and I, expecting our first child, moved into the old house in Atchison, Kansas. The place was a steal, spacious, historic, with a front room that had once been a doctor's office. The landlord mentioned it had a colorful past, but we shrugged it off. We were young, broke, and needed a home. What we didn't know was that the house wasn't empty. Something was waiting for us, something angry. The first night, the air felt heavy as we hauled our boxes inside. The house smelled of dust and something sharp, like old medicine. Our dog, Max, a hulking German shepherd, refused to cross the threshold at first. He stood at the door, hackles raised, growling at nothing. Deborah laughed it off, saying he was just spooked by the move. I tugged his collar, and he finally slunk inside, but his eyes darted to the staircase leading to the second floor. That night, we slept in the master bedroom upstairs. Around 2 a.m., I woke to Max snarling at the door. His teeth bared, he stared at the hallway where the nursery room sat empty. Deborah stirred, mumbling, "What's wrong with him?" I got up, heart pounding, and cracked the door open. The hallway was dark, silent, but the air felt wrong, thick, like walking through fog. Max wouldn't budge, so I shut the door and tried to sleep. The nursery. The next morning, Deborah started unpacking the nursery. It was a small room with faded wallpaper and a single window overlooking the street. She hummed as she folded baby clothes, but Max wouldn't go near the door. He'd lie at the top of the stairs whining, his eyes fixed on the nursery's entrance. I teased Deborah about her haunted decorating skills, but she didn't laugh. "It's cold in there," she said, rubbing her arms, "even with the heater on." That afternoon, I was in the kitchen when I heard a crash from upstairs. I bolted up, finding Deborah staring at a shattered picture frame on the nursery floor. "It was on the shelf," she whispered. "I didn't touch it." The glass had cracked and a perfect star burst, as if something had slammed it down. We chalked it up to old houses settling, but Max's low growl told me he didn't buy it. The scratches. A week later, the house started to feel alive. I'd hear footsteps at night, small, quick ones, like a child running across the floorboards, always from the nursery. Deborah never heard them, but Max did. He'd pace, his claws clicking, refusing to go upstairs after dark. One night, as I checked the locks downstairs, the TV in the living room flickered on. Static filled the screen, and a toy truck we'd bought for the baby rolled across the coffee table. I froze. The batteries weren't even in it yet. Then came the scratches. It started on a Tuesday. I was in the dining room, once Dr. Charles Finney's operating room, sorting bills. A sharp pain tore across my back like claws raking my skin. I yelped, twisting to see 3 red welts rising under my torn shirt. Deborah rushed in, eyes wide. "What happened?" she gasped. I had no answer. The room was empty, but the air was freezing, and Max was barking furiously at the doorway. The attacks got worse. Every few days I'd feel that burning sting on my arms, my chest, my neck. Always 3 scratches, always deep enough to bleed. Deborah and the baby were never touched. It was like the house, or whatever was in it, hated me alone. Max started sleeping, pressed against me, his growls a constant warning. The fires one night, I smelled smoke. It was faint, coming from the kitchen. I ran down to find a small trash can smoldering, flames licking the curtains. I doused it with a pitcher of water, heart hammering. The fire had no source, no matches, no stove left on. Deborah stood in the doorway, clutching our newborn son, her. "Tony, this isn't right," she whispered. "This house doesn't want us here." The fires kept happening. A pile of newspapers in the basement, a dishcloth in the counter. Once, a candle we'd never lit rolled across the dining room table, its wick sparking as it hit the floor. Each time, Max would go berserk, barking at corners, at walls, at nothing. I started sleeping with a fire extinguisher by the bed. The haunted dining room. The dining room became the epicenter. It was where Dr. Finney had operated, where a little girl named Sallie had died under his knife. I learned her story from a neighbor. An emergency surgery gone wrong, a 6-year-old girl screaming as she bled out. The neighbor said her name with a shiver. Sally Pickman. Folks say she never left. One evening, I set up a camcorder in the dining room, hoping to catch something. The tape ran for an hour before the battery died, fully charged when I started. When I played it back, the footage was mostly static. But at the 42-minute mark, a child's voice whispered, "Why'd you hurt me?" My stomach dropped. Deborah refused to watch it. The next day, I brought in a flashlight to check the dining room's corners. The beam flickered, then died. I shook it, replaced the batteries. Nothing. As I stood there, a cold gust brushed my neck, and the door slammed shut. Max howled from the other side, scratching at the wood. When I finally got the door open, 3 fresh scratches burned across my forearm. The apparition Deborah saw her first. It was late, maybe 3 a.m., when she woke to feed the baby. She glanced at the nursery doorway and froze. A small figure stood there, a girl, maybe 6, with pale skin and dark eyes. She wore a tattered dress, her head tilted as if studying Deborah. "Tony," Deborah whispered, shaking me. But when I looked, the doorway was empty. Deborah didn't sleep that night. She kept saying she wasn't angry, just sad. I saw her a week later. I was in the basement checking the furnace when the light bulb popped. In the darkness, a faint glow appeared at the far wall, a small, shadowy shape. It moved toward me, silent, its eyes locked on mine. I stumbled back, my breath catching, and the shape vanished. Upstairs, Max was whimpering, pressed against Deborah's legs. The breaking point. By month 3, we were unraveling. Objects moved daily, keys, books, even furniture, doors locked and unlocked on their own. Knocks echoed from the walls, always in sets of 3. Max was a wreck, barely eating, his fur patchy from stress. Deborah begged me to leave, but we had nowhere to go. The lease was ironclad, and we were drowning in debt. One night, I snapped. I stood in the dining room, shouting into the empty air, "Sallie, if you're here, stop this! We didn't hurt you!" Silence answered. Then every light in the house flickered, and a child's laugh, high, sharp, rang out. The camcorder, left on the table, turned on by itself, its lens swiveling toward me. I grabbed Deborah and the baby, and we fled to a motel. The return. We couldn't afford to stay away long. 2 days later, we returned. The house was quiet, almost mocking. Max refused to enter, so we left him in the yard. That night, the activity exploded. Marbles rolled across the nursery floor, clattering against the walls. Footsteps raced up and down the stairs. In the dining room, a chair slid across the floor, stopping inches from my legs. Deborah sobbed, clutching the baby as I stood guard with a flashlight that kept dying. At dawn, I found scratches on my chest, deeper than ever, oozing blood. Deborah packed our bags. "We're done," she said. I didn't argue. As we loaded the car, I glanced back at the house. In the nursery window, a small face watched us. Her eyes weren't sad anymore. They were furious. The aftermath. We moved out that day. The landlord didn't refund our deposit, but I didn't care. We crashed with friends, then rented a tiny apartment far from Atchison. Max slowly recovered, but he'd never go near a staircase again. Deborah and I didn't talk about the house for years. The baby, thank God, was fine. Never touched, never harmed. I later learned the Sallie house became a tourist trap, billed as America's most haunted home. People pay to spend the night chasing thrills. They sign waivers, warned of personal injury. Some come back with scratches, bruises, stories of a little girl who watches from the shadows. I don't doubt them. I lived it. I still dream of her. Sallie, standing in the dining room, her eyes boring into me. I wake up checking my skin for scratches, my heart racing. Deborah says I'm imagining it, but I know better. That house doesn't let you go. Not really. Story 6. The Lizzie Borden House. My name is Clara, and I'm not one to believe in ghosts. I've always thought hauntings were just stories people told to scare each other, or maybe a way to cope with old tragedies. But after my stay at the Lizzie Borden House in Fall River, Massachusetts, I'm not so sure anymore. What happened there over 3 nights in late October last year changed me. I need to write this down, not to convince anyone, but to make sense of it for myself. Here's my story, exactly as it unfolded. Night 1. Arrival. The Lizzie Borden house loomed on 2nd Street, its gray clapboard facade looking oddly ordinary under the overcast sky. I'd booked a room on a whim, drawn by the house's infamous history. In 1892, Andrew and Abby Borden were hacked to death here, and their daughter, Lizzie, walked free after a trial that gripped the nation. The house was now a bed and breakfast, complete with guided tours and a reputation for things that went bump in the night. I wasn't here to hunt for spirits. I just wanted to experience a good story to tell my friends. I checked in at the front desk, where a woman behind the counter, Sarah, with sharp gray eyes, handed me a key to the guest room on the 2nd floor where Abby had died. "You're brave," she said with a smile. "That's one of our most active rooms." I chuckled, thinking it was playing up the tourist trap vibe. The house was decorated in heavy Victorian style, floral wallpaper and creaky lampshades and creaky floors that groaned with every step. My room had a 4-poster bed, a quilted cover, and a small rocking chair in the corner. A framed photo of Abby Borden hung on the wall, her stern face watching me as I unpacked. That evening, I joined a guided tour with a dozen other guests. Our guide, a lanky man named Tom, led us through the parlor where Andrew's body had been found. "Lights flicker here often," he said, pointing to a chandelier overhead. "And guests hear footsteps on the veranda when no one's outside." I rolled my eyes but listened as he recounted tales of objects moving, coat hangers sliding across rods, DVDs scooting off shelves. In the attic, where the maid once slept, he mentioned shadow figures and a motion sensor that triggered at 3 a.m. with no cause. The group murmured, but I stayed quiet, skeptical. Back in my room, I settled in for the night. The house was silent, save for the occasional creak of settling wood. Around midnight, I woke to a faint tapping sound, like someone pacing in the hallway. I sat up, straining to listen. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. I held my breath, waiting for a knock or a voice, but nothing came. After a minute, I crept to the door and peeked out. The hallway was empty, dimly lit by a single lamp. I chalked it up to an overactive imagination and went back to bed. But sleep didn't come easily. Night 2, the cold. The next morning, I mentioned the footsteps to Sarah at breakfast. She nodded, unsurprised. "That's common on the second floor," she said. "Guests feel cold spots here too, especially near Abby's room." I brushed it off, but as I walked back upstairs, the air grew chilly, like stepping into a drafty cellar. I shivered, rubbing my arms. The cold lingered near my door, then vanished as I stepped inside. Odd, but old houses have quirks, right? That day, I explored Fall River, visiting the Historical Society and reading about the Borden murders. The brutality of the crime. Andrew struck 11 times, Abby over 10, stayed with me. Back at the house, I joined another tour, this time with a couple, Mark and Jen, who were staying in Andrew's room downstairs. They seemed spooked, whispering about a coat hanger that had slid across their closet rod the night before. "It moved on its own," Jen insisted. I smiled politely, but inside, I thought they were buying into the hype. That night, I brought a notebook to jot down any paranormal experiences, determined to debunk them. Around 1 a.m., I was writing when the rocking chair in my room creaked. I froze. The chair was still, but I could have sworn I saw it sway slightly, like someone had just stood up. I laughed nervously, blaming the dim light. Then came a giggle, a child's laugh, soft but clear, from the corner of the room. My heart pounded. I scanned the shadows, but nothing was there. "Hello?" I whispered, feeling foolish. No answer. I barely slept, jumping at every creak. At 3 a.m., a sharp gasp echoed in the hallway, followed by a faint voice saying, "Help me." I bolted upright, my pulse racing. It sounded like a man, but the plea was childlike. I didn't dare open the door. Instead, I huddled under the quilt, waiting for dawn. When morning came, I found Mark and Jen in the dining room, pale and quiet. "Did you hear anything last night?" I asked. Jen nodded. "A child's voice in our room," she said. "It said, 'Help me.'" My stomach dropped. We hadn't spoken before. There was no way she could have known. Night 3. The attic. By the third day, I was rattled but curious. I asked Tom about the child's voice. He sighed, leaning against the parlor wall. "People hear kids laughing or crying sometimes. There's a local legend about neighborhood children who drowned nearby, but we don't know if it's true." He paused. "The attic's where things get weirdest, though. Want to see it?" I nodded, though my nerves screamed otherwise. Tom led me and a few guests to the 3rd floor. The attic was cramped, with a slanted ceiling and a single window. A cot sat in one corner next to a motion sensor. "This went off at 3 a.m. once," Tom said. "Scared a guest half to death." The air felt heavy, like it was pressing on my chest. As we stood there, a shadow flickered near the doorway. I blinked, and it was gone. "Did you see that?" I asked Tom. He shrugged. "Happens all the time." That night, I couldn't stay in my room. The cold spot had returned, stronger now, and the giggling came again, louder. I grabbed my flashlight and crept to the attic, desperate to confront whatever was there. The stairs creaked underfoot, and the air grew colder with each step. In the attic, I sat on the cot, my flashlight beam darting across the walls. "Who's here?" I whispered. Silence. Then a wooden block on the floor slid an inch toward me. I gasped, scrambling back. The motion sensor's red light blinked on, then off. No one was there. Footsteps sounded below, heavy and deliberate, like someone pacing the second floor. I ran downstairs, my heart in my throat. In the hallway, I saw a figure, a woman in a long dress standing near my room. She turned, her face pale and blurred, before vanishing. I stumbled back, my flashlight shaking. The house was silent again, but the cold clung to me, seeping into my bones. I checked out the next morning, barely speaking to Sarah or the other guests. I didn't need to stay longer. I'd seen enough. The Lizzie Borden house isn't just a museum or a gimmick. Something lingers there. Maybe the Bordens, maybe those children, maybe both. I don't know what they want, but I feel them still, in the quiet moments when I close my eyes. I haven't slept well since. Story 7. The Myrtles Plantation, St. Francisville, Louisiana. The air hung thick with the Myrtles Plantation secrets as I stepped through its weathered front door, the oak creaking beneath my weight of centuries. It was June, and the Louisiana heat clung to me like a second skin, but the chill that greeted me inside the foyer wasn't from any breeze. The bed and breakfast had been my obsession for months, its tales of restless spirits drawing me like a moth to a flickering flame. I'd read about Chloe, the vengeful ghost in her green turban, and the poisoned children whose faces lingered in mirrors. The stories felt alive, pulsing through the internet forums I scoured, and now here I was, a guest in their domain. The innkeeper, a wiry woman with eyes that darted like she knew too much, handed me a brass key to room 3. "Mind the mirror in the hall," she said, her voice low. "It don't like being stared at." I nodded, half smiling, but her words burrowed into me. The grand hallway stretched ahead, its wallpaper peeling like old skin, and there it was, the infamous mirror, framed in ornate mahogany, glinting under a chandelier's dim glow. I avoided looking too long, my reflection feeling wrong somehow. That night, sleep wouldn't come. The 4-poster bed groaned under my weight, and the room's shadows seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. Around midnight, a faint giggle drifted through the walls, high-pitched, like a child's. I froze, straining to hear. It came again, closer, from the hallway. My heart thudded as I cracked the door open, the hinges squealing. The corridor was empty, but the air felt heavy, like someone had just passed through. The mirror caught my eye, and for a split second I swore I saw a small handprint smear across its surface, then vanish. By morning, I chalked it up to nerves. The plantation was old, creaky, designed to play tricks on the mind. I joined a day tour, trailing a guide who spun tales of Chloe's betrayal and the poisoned cake that killed Mrs. Woodruff and her daughters. We paused outside the parlor where the mirror loomed. "Some say the girls never left," the guide whispered. "Their faces show up if you look too long." I glanced at it, catching only my own tired eyes, but a guest beside me gasped. "There, did you see that?" she hissed, pointing at the glass. I saw nothing, but her trembling finger made my skin prickle. That afternoon, I wandered the grounds, the moss-draped oaks casting long shadows. Near the back veranda, I found the spot where Chloe's ghost was said to linger in photographs, a gap between 2 outbuildings. I snapped a picture with my phone, half expecting nothing. When I checked the screen, my breath caught. A faint, translucent figure stood there, her head wrapped in a green turban, eyes boring into the lens. I blinked, and the image was gone, my gallery showing only the empty scene. My hand shook as I pocketed the phone. Dinner in the dining room was quiet, save for the clink of silverware. Another guest, a man with a nervous laugh, mentioned hearing footsteps in his room the night before. "Sounded like kids running," he said. The innkeeper, clearing plates, didn't look up, but her lips tightened. I kept silent about my own experience, the giggle still echoing in my mind. Back in my room, I set up my camera on a tripod, pointing it at the door. If something was here, I'd catch it. At 2 a.m., the camera's motion sensor beeped. I jolted awake, fumbling for the playback. The footage showed the door creaking open, though I'd locked it. A shadow flickered across the frame, small like a child's silhouette, then vanished. The door stayed ajar. I checked it, finding no sign of tampering, but the lock felt loose, like it had been toyed with. Sleep was impossible after that. I sat up, listening to the house groan, every creak sounding like a footstep. The next day, I explored the ballroom, its dusty chandelier swaying slightly despite the still air. A grand piano sat in the corner, its keys yellowed. As I ran my fingers over them, a single note rang out, sharp, unprompted. I yanked my hand back, heart racing. The air grew colder, and behind me I heard a soft giggle, the same one from the first night. I spun around, but the room was empty. My camera, slung around my neck, suddenly felt heavy, like someone was tugging it. When I checked the lens, a tiny handprint smudged the glass. That evening, I joined the candlelit mystery tour, hoping for answers. The guide led us through dim corridors, recounting Chloe's hanging and the murder of William Winter in the 1870s. We stopped at the mirror again. "Some guests see the girls," she said. "Others feel a hand on their shoulder." As she spoke, a cold pressure grazed my neck, like fingers brushing my skin. I flinched, but no one was behind me. The group moved on, but I lingered, staring into the mirror. Two pale faces flickered in the reflection, small, hollow-eyed, gone in an instant. Back in my room, I reviewed my camera's footage from the ballroom. At the timestamp of the piano note, a faint orb drifted across the screen, hovering near the keys. My stomach churned. I packed my bag, ready to leave at dawn, but the house wasn't done with me. Around 3 a.m., the lights flickered, and the elevator down the hall dinged, its doors grinding open. I peered out, seeing nothing, but the air felt charged, like a storm was brewing inside. Then from the ballroom below, the piano began to play, a halting, eerie melody, notes stumbling like a child's attempt. I grabbed my camera and crept downstairs, the music growing louder. The ballroom door was cracked open, candlelight spilling out. Inside, the piano keys moved, dipping and rising, but no one sat at the bench. A figure stood in the corner, Chloe, her green turban unmistakable, her eyes locked on me. She raised a hand, pointing at the mirror across the room. My reflection stared back, but behind me, two small girls stood, their faces pale and twisted, mouths open in silent screams. I ran, my camera slipping from my hands, its lens shattering on the floor. The piano's music chased me up the stairs, the giggles now a chorus, shrill and relentless. In my room, I barred the door, my breath ragged. The lights went out, plunging me into darkness. From the hallway, a soft knock sounded, then another, growing louder. Go away, I whispered, but the knocking didn't stop. The mirror in my room, smaller, less grand than the one downstairs, caught the moonlight. A handprint bloomed on its surface, then another, spreading like frost. At dawn, I fled, leaving my broken camera behind. The innkeeper watched me go, her eyes unreadable. As I drove away, the plantation shrank in my rear view, but the weight of those eyes, Chloe's, the girl's, followed me. My phone buzzed, and I glanced at it, nearly swerving off the road. A photo had appeared in my gallery, one I hadn't taken, me, asleep in room 3, with a figure in a green turban standing over my bed. Story 8. The Lemp Mansion Whispers. My name is Clara, and I never believed in ghosts. Not until I stepped into the Lemp Mansion. It was 1976, and I'd just moved to St. Louis for a job as a typist. The mansion, newly restored as an inn and restaurant, needed a bookkeeper. The pay was decent, and the idea of working in a grand old house intrigued me. I didn't know its history then, just that it was beautiful, with its towering gables and stained glass windows glinting in the Missouri sun. But the first night I stayed there, something shifted. The air felt heavy, like it was watching me. This is my story of what happened in that house, moment by moment, as the shadows of the Lemp family found me. It started on my first evening. I'd been given a small room on the second floor to stay in while I settled into the job. The manager, Mr. Pointer, had warned me the place could feel lively at night, but I thought he meant creaky pipes or settling wood. After finishing the day's ledgers, I locked the office and climbed the winding staircase. The hallway was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hold your breath. My room was at the end, past a tall mirror framed in dark oak. As I walked, my reflection flickered in the glass. I stopped. For a split second, I thought I saw another face. A woman's, pale, with hollow eyes, staring back. I spun around, but the corridor was empty. My heart pounded, but I told myself it was just the dim light playing tricks. That night, I couldn't sleep. The room was cozy, with a four-poster bed and lace curtains, but the silence was oppressive. Around 2 a.m., I heard it, a soft knock-knock on the door. I froze, waiting for a voice, maybe a late-night guest needing help. Nothing. I crept to the door and peeked through the keyhole. Empty hallway. I opened it, just a crack, and the air felt colder than it should have. The knocks didn't come again, but as I lay back down, I heard faint footsteps pacing outside my room, slow and deliberate, like someone circling. They stopped right at my door. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I laughed it off. Old houses make noises, right? I mentioned it to Sarah, a waitress who'd worked there since the restoration. She went pale. "You heard the knocks?" she whispered. "That's how it starts." She told me about the Lemp family, William Sr., who shot himself in his study, his son Frederick, dead too young, Elsa, the heiress, gone by her own hand, and William Jr., who ended it all on this very staircase. Their deaths clung to the house, she said, like damp rot. Boarders in the 50s had heard those same knocks, those same footsteps, when the mansion was a crumbling wreck. I brushed it off, but her words stuck with me. That afternoon, I was in the dining hall, tallying receipts, when a glass on the bar counter slid off and shattered. No one was near it. The other staff froze, exchanging looks. "Happens all the time," one of them muttered, sweeping up the shards. I stared at the bar, my skin prickling. The air felt charged, like a storm was coming. Later, as I worked in the office, my pen vanished from the desk. I searched everywhere, drawers, floor, even my bag. It reappeared an hour later, right where I'd left it. I told myself I'd just missed it, but my hand shook as I locked up that night. By my third day, I was jumpy. The mansion's beauty, its chandeliers, its carved woodwork, felt like a mask. I avoided the mirror in the hallway, taking the back stairs instead. But that evening, as I passed William Sr.'s old bedroom, I heard a crackling sound, like fire. The door was ajar, and I peeked inside. The fireplace, cold and unused, flared to life for a heartbeat, flames licking up, then gone. I stumbled back, my breath caught in my throat. No one else was on that floor. I ran to my room and locked the door. But the knocks came again that night, louder, insistent. Knock, knock, knock. I pressed my ear to the wood, and a faint whisper slithered through. "Why are you here?" It was a man's voice, low and broken. I didn't answer. I didn't move until dawn. Sarah found me in the kitchen the next morning, pale and clutching coffee. I told her about the fireplace, the voice. She nodded, unsurprised. "They don't like newcomers," she said. She mentioned the attic, a place the staff avoided. It was where William Jr.'s secret son, born with Down syndrome, hidden away, supposedly lived. They called him the monkey-faced boy, a cruel nickname from old rumors. Guests had seen toys move up there, heard a child's voice on recordings. I didn't want to believe it, but the mansion was wearing me down. That day, I noticed cold spots in the office, places where the air turned icy for no reason. My papers would flutter like a breeze had slipped through a sealed window. On my fifth night, I couldn't avoid the attic. Mr. Pointer asked me to check on some stored ledgers up there. I protested, but he insisted, handing me a flashlight. The attic stairs were narrow, the air thick with dust. The space was cluttered, old furniture, trunks, a small rocking horse in the corner. A single window looked out over the city. I found the ledgers quickly, but as I turned to leave, the rocking horse creaked, swaying gently. No draft, no one else there. My flashlight flickered, and in the dimness, I saw it. A small, pale face in the window's reflection, watching me. Not my face. Not human, exactly. I dropped the ledgers and ran, my footsteps echoing too loud in the empty house. "Downstairs," I told Sarah. She crossed herself, then stopped, remembering I didn't like that talk. "You saw him," she said. "The boy." She showed me a photo from a guest's tour, a blurry shape in that same attic window taken years ago. My stomach twisted. That night, the knocks were relentless, joined by scratches at my door like nails dragging across wood. I stayed awake, clutching a letter opener, useless against whatever was out there. By the seventh day, I was unraveling. The mansion wasn't just haunted, it was alive, feeding on my fear. I saw her again, the woman from the mirror, gliding down the corridor in a long dress. She didn't look at me, just drifted toward William Jr.'s old bathroom, where the lights now flickered constantly. I followed, against my better judgment. The door was locked, but I heard water running inside, then stop. When I found a key and opened it, the room was dry, but the mirror was fogged up, a single word traced in the steam. Leave, I wanted to. I told Mr. Pointer I was quitting, but he begged me to stay one more week. Business was booming, and he needed me. I agreed, reluctantly, but the mansion punished me for it. That night, on the staircase, I felt a push, hard, deliberate. I caught the railing, but my knees buckled. No one was behind me. The air hummed with whispers, too many voices to count, overlapping in a furious chorus. "Get out! Get out! Get out!" I ran to my room, packed my bag, and swore I'd leave at first light. My last night was the worst. Around midnight, the knocks stopped. The silence was worse. I sat on my bed, bag ready, waiting for dawn. Then I heard it. A child's giggle, soft and close, from inside my room. I turned, and the rocking horse from the attic was there in the corner, swaying. I screamed, scrambling for the door, but it wouldn't open. The giggles grew louder, joined by footsteps circling me heavy and fast. The mirror on the wall cracked, splitting my reflection. In the shards, I saw them. William Sr., Elsa, William Jr., and the boy, their faces twisted, eyes black. They reached out, their hands cold as they brushed my skin. I don't know how I got the door open, but I ran down the staircase, through the dining hall, out into the street. I didn't look back. I never returned to the Lemp mansion. I heard it's still there, an inn and restaurant with ghost tours and dinner shows. People leave coins at the Lemp graves, chasing thrills. But I know what's inside those walls. The family never left. They're waiting, always waiting, for someone new to listen to their knocks, to see their faces, to feel their hands. I still hear the giggles sometimes in the dark, and I check my mirrors twice, just to be sure I'm alone. Story 9, The Haunting of Monte Cristo, Homestead. My name is Lawrence Ryan, and I grew up in Monte Cristo Homestead, a place they call Australia's most haunted house. I was just a boy when my parents, Reginald and Olive, bought the crumbling Victorian manor in 1963, tucked away in Junee, New South Wales. They saw a chance to restore its faded grandeur, to turn it into a museum, a curiosity for tourists. But I saw something else, something that watched us from the shadows, that touched us with unseen hands, that whispered in the dark. This is my story, pieced together from the nights I spent in that house, from the moments that still wake me in a cold sweat. It started the first week we moved in. I was 8, small for my age, trailing behind my parents as they hauled boxes into the cavernous foyer. The air smelled of dust and old wood, and the grand staircase loomed above us, its polished banister catching the faint light from the chandelier. My brothers were upstairs, arguing over bedrooms, but I stayed below, staring at the portraits on the walls, stern faces from another century, their eyes seeming to follow me. That's when I felt it, a cold breath on the back of my neck, like someone standing too close. I spun around, but the foyer was empty. My heart thudded, and I ran to find my mother, convincing myself it was just the draft of an old house. But it wasn't. A few nights later, my parents came home from town to find every window and door in the homestead ablaze with light. I'd been asleep, tucked in my room, but I woke to their voices downstairs, sharp with confusion. "We turned everything off," my father said, pacing the kitchen. "Every switch, every lamp." My mother nodded, her face pale. They'd watched the lights flicker out the moment they stepped inside, plunging the house into darkness. We checked the wiring the next day, but the electrician found nothing wrong, no shorts, no faults. That was the first time I saw fear in my father's eyes, though he never admitted it. The house seemed to settle after that, or maybe we just got used to its creaks and groans. But then the footsteps started. Late at night, when the world was quiet, I'd hear them, slow, deliberate, pacing the upstairs hallway. At first I thought it was my brothers, sneaking around to scare me. I'd creep to the door, heart pounding, and peek out. But the hall was always empty. the floorboard silent under my bare feet. Once, I worked up the courage to follow the sound. It led me to the balcony overlooking the garden where a young maid had fallen to her death a century ago. The air there was heavy, like stepping into a fog, and I swear I saw a shadow move at the edge of my vision, a fleeting shape, gone when I blinked. My brothers felt it too, though they wouldn't say it out loud. We'd sit at the kitchen table pretending to do homework, while the house played its tricks. Pictures would fall off the walls, landing upright without a crack in the glass. My mother's sewing basket would slide across the parlor floor, stopping at the foot of the staircase. And the staircase, God, that staircase, it was where Magdalena, the Crawley baby, had died, tumbling down those polished steps in 1885. My youngest brother Tom refused to climb it alone. He'd stand at the bottom gripping the banister, his face white. "Someone's there," he'd whisper, pointing to the top. I never saw anything, but I felt it, a weight, a presence, like eyes boring into my back. One night, I woke to Tom screaming. I bolted to his room, my parents close behind. He was curled up in bed, sobbing, saying an old man had stood at the foot of his bed, staring at him. He was all gray, Tom choked out, like a ghost. My father checked the room, the windows, the locks. Nothing, but Tom wouldn't sleep there again. He moved into my room, and we'd lie awake, listening for those footsteps, for the soft thump of something moving in the dark. The touches came next. At first, they were subtle. A brush against my arm in the hallway, a tug on my shirt when I stood in the kitchen. But they grew bolder. One evening, I was reading in the parlor when I felt a hand rest on my shoulder, heavy and cold. I froze, my book slipping to the floor. "Mom," I whispered, praying it was her. But when I turned, the room was empty, the air thick with that same heavy silence. My mother had her own story. She'd felt fingers graze her neck while she was washing dishes, so real she dropped a plate, expecting to see someone behind her. There was never anyone there. The animals suffered too. We had cats, strays my mother fed, who'd curl up in the kitchen at night. One morning she found 3 of them dead, gutted, their insides spilled across the tiles. There was no blood trail, no sign of a fox or dog breaking in. My father buried them in the garden, his face grim, while my mother scrubbed the floor, her hands shaking. After that, no animal would stay in the house. The cats we tried to keep would hiss at empty corners, their fur bristling before bolting out the door. The staircase became the heart of it all. Visitors, locals, tourists, even skeptics would pause on those steps, their faces tightening. Children threw tantrums there, kicking and screaming for no reason. A woman on one of my father's ghost tours swore she saw a girl in a white dress at the top, her face blurred before she vanished. I started avoiding the stairs myself, taking the back way to my room. But one night, I had no choice. It was late, and I'd been helping my father lock up. As I climbed, something pushed me, hard, right between my shoulder blades. I stumbled, catching the banister just in time, my breath ragged. I looked back, expecting to see Tom playing a prank, but the foyer was dark, empty. I ran the rest of the way, my skin crawling. The house didn't just haunt us. It haunted everyone who came near. By the 1990s, Monte Cristo was famous, drawing ghost hunters and thrill seekers. My father led tours, guiding groups through the darkened rooms, pointing out where the maid had fallen, where the stable boy had burned. People brought equipment, EMF meters, recorders, hoping to catch proof. They got it. One team played back a tape of faint whispers, a voice saying Magdalena in a room no one had entered. Another caught a shadow moving across the balcony, recorded on a grainy camcorder. Even skeptics left shaken, admitting they'd felt something. A chill, a touch, a sense of being watched. I moved out when I was 18, desperate for a life without shadows. But the house followed me. I'd dream of the staircase, of footsteps chasing me down that endless hall. My parents stayed. Stubborn or spellbound, I never knew which. My mother lived there until last year, November 2024, when she passed in her sleep. My father was already gone, taken by a heart attack in 2014. After her death, we closed Monte Cristo, locking its doors for good. The sign on the gate says it'll never open again, and I hope that's true. But I know the house isn't done. It's still there, waiting, its windows like eyes in the dark. I can feel it even now, miles away. A pull, a whisper, a hand on my shoulder. The last time I stood in that foyer, I heard footsteps above me, slow and steady, pacing the hall. I didn't look back. I never will. Story 10, The Whaley House. My name is Clara, and I'm a docent at the Whaley House in Old Town, San Diego. I've been guiding tours through this creaky 1857 mansion for 3 years, showing visitors its polished wood floors, antique furniture, and the stories of the Whaley family who lived and died here. At first, I thought the ghost tales were just part of the charm, a way to draw in tourists. But the house has a way of changing you. It's been 6 months since my last tour, and I still wake up hearing footsteps on stairs that aren't there. Let me tell you what happened, piece by piece, before I lose the nerve to put it down. It started on a quiet Tuesday in March, my first solo evening tour. The Whaley house is different after dark. The air feels heavier, like it's holding its breath. My group was small, a couple from Ohio, a retired teacher, and a teenage boy who kept snapping photos with his phone. We began in the parlor, where the chandelier's crystals glinted under the dim lights. I was explaining how Thomas Whaley built the house on the site of the old gallows when the smell hit me, sharp, like cigar smoke. I glanced around, confused. The house is strictly smoke-free, and no one in the group was smoking. "Anyone smell that?" I asked, half laughing to keep things light. The couple nodded, sniffing the air. The boy, though, was staring at the mirror above the fireplace. "There's something in there," he whispered. I followed his gaze, but the mirror showed only our reflections. "Just a trick of the light," I said, though my skin prickled. As we moved to the dining room, the smell faded, but the boy kept glancing back, his phone forgotten in his hand. In the dining room, I told them about Violet Whaley, the 21-year-old daughter who died in 1885, found with a gunshot in the privy out back. The official report called it suicide, but the revolver wasn't found until 1950, buried under the floor. Some say she was murdered, her spirit still restless. The teacher asked if Violet's ghost was ever seen. I smiled, sticking to the script. Guests sometimes report a figure in the upstairs hallway near where she died. I didn't mention that I'd never seen her myself. Not yet. We climbed the narrow staircase to the second floor. Halfway up, the boy stopped dead. "Did you hear that?" he asked. I hadn't heard anything, but the couple behind me looked uneasy. "Sounded like crying," the woman said softly. I strained my ears. but the house was silent. "Old houses creak," I said, though my heart was pounding. At the top, I led them to the master bedroom, where a cradle sat in the corner, a relic from the Whaley's children, 2 of whom died young. As I spoke, the cradle rocked slightly, just once. No breeze, no one near it. The teacher gasped, and the boy backed toward the door. "It's just settling," I lied, my voice tight. The tour ended in the hallway near the restroom, where Violet's death still lingers in the air. I was wrapping up when the boy's phone flashed, its camera going off. He stared at the screen, his face pale. "There's a woman in the photo," he stammered, holding it out. I looked, expecting a glare or shadow. But there, in the hallway behind us, was a faint figure in a long dress, her face blurred, but her eyes dark and fixed on the camera. The group crowded around, whispering. I forced a smile. "That's unusual," I said, ushering them out before they could ask more. Alone, I checked the hallway. Empty, but the air felt cold, like someone had just walked through me. The next week, I couldn't shake the photo. I told my supervisor, Maria, who'd worked at the house for a decade. She wasn't surprised. "Everyone here has a story," she said. "Last year I saw sheet music fly off the organ in the parlor twice in one day." She paused, then added, "Be careful near the stairs, Clara. That's where the kids get scared." I nodded, but her words stuck with me. The staircase where Violet fell, where children on tours sometimes screamed for no reason. My next tour was a daytime group, families mostly. I thought daylight would feel safer, but the house didn't care. In the old jail cells beneath the house, part of the original gallows site, the air turned icy. A little girl in pigtails clung to her mom, whimpering. "It feels bad down here," she said. Her brother, maybe 10, said he saw a shadow move in the cell. I hurried them upstairs, but the cold followed, clinging to my skin. In the parlor, a man said he felt a tug on his jacket. He laughed it off, but his eyes darted to the door. That night, I stayed late to lock up. The house was empty, the lights off except for a single lamp in the office. I was at the desk when I heard it. Footsteps on the stairs, slow and deliberate. I froze, listening. The steps stopped at the top, then started again, coming closer. I grabbed my keys, my hands shaking, and called out, "Hello?" No answer. The footsteps stopped right outside the office door. I waited, barely breathing, but the door didn't open. When I finally looked, the hallway was empty, but the lamp flickered, and that cigar smell was back, sharp and close. By April, I was jumping at every creak. Maria noticed. "You're feeling it, aren't you?" she said. "The house gets under your skin." She told me about the docents who quit after seeing things they couldn't explain. Shadows in mirrors, groans from empty rooms. One guide swore she felt hands on her shoulders in the slave quarters, pushing her toward the door. I didn't want to believe it, but the house was wearing me down. My next evening tour was with a group of Marines from a nearby base. They were loud, joking about ghosts, but even they quieted in the jail cells. One said he smelled cigars. Another heard a groan from the corner. Upstairs in Violet's hallway, a Marine stopped short. "Someone touched my arm," he said, rubbing his sleeve. His buddy laughed. The guy wasn't joking. As we passed the restroom, I felt it. A sudden drop in temperature, like stepping into a freezer. The Marines didn't notice, but I saw a shadow flicker in the window across the hall. It was gone when I looked again. That night, I dreamed of the staircase. I was climbing it, but the steps kept stretching, and something was behind me. breathing. At the top, a woman in a long dress stood, her face hidden. She reached out, and I woke up gasping, my shoulder aching like someone had grabbed it. The next day, I checked the tour log. A guest had written, "Felt a hand on my back on the stairs, thought it was my wife, but she was in front of me." By May, I was avoiding the staircase alone, but the house didn't let up. During a noon tour, a woman screamed in the parlor. "The chandelier!" she gasped. It was swinging slow and steady, though no one was near it. The group stared, silent. I mumbled something about drafts, but my hands were clammy. Later, in the master bedroom, a child pointed at the cradle. "Why is it moving?" she asked. It wasn't, until I looked, and it rocked once sharply, like someone had pushed it. That evening, I was locking up when I heard crying, soft, like a child coming from upstairs. I told myself it was the wind, but my feet moved before I could stop them. At the top of the stairs, the crying stopped, replaced by a whisper, too faint to make out. I turned on every light, checked every room. Nothing. But in Violet's hallway, the air was so heavy I could barely breathe. Something brushed my arm light as a feather, and I ran, not stopping until I was outside. June was my breaking point. I was leading a ghost hunt, one of those after-dark tours with infrared cameras. The group was excited, waving EMF meters, but I was on edge. In the jail cells, the meters spiked, and one guest caught an orb in a photo, small, glowing, hovering near the bars. Upstairs, we set up audio recorders in Violet's hallway. At first, nothing. Then, a faint voice came through, a woman saying, "Why?" The group went silent. I played it back, and there it was again. Why? My stomach twisted, Violet asking about her death or something else. In the parlor, the EMF meters went wild near the organ. A guest swore she saw sheet music flutter, though the windows were closed. I felt it then, a tug on my shoulder, sharp this time, like someone wanted my attention. I spun around, but no one was there. The group was across the room, staring at me. "You okay?" one asked. I nodded, but my voice was gone. The cigar smell was everywhere, choking me. The final straw came at the staircase. We were heading down when a guest tripped, catching herself on the railing. "Something pushed me," she whispered, her eyes wide. Another said he saw a shadow at the top, watching us. I looked up, and for a split second, I saw her, Violet, in her long dress, her face pale and angry. She was gone when I blinked, but the cold stayed, seeping into my bones. I quit the next day. I couldn't take another tour, another night of footsteps or shadows, or that voice asking, "Why?" The Whaley house is still there, open for tours, drawing thousands who want to feel its history or its ghosts. I don't go back, but sometimes in the quiet, I hear those stairs creaking, and I wonder if Violet's still waiting, her question unanswered, her anger growing. Story 11. Whispers of the Winchester Maze. My name is Clara, and I'm a tour guide at the Winchester Mystery House. I've been here for 3 years, leading visitors through its labyrinth of 160 rooms, 47 staircases, and 10,000 windows. The mansion's oddities, doors that open to walls, staircases that climb to nowhere, are enough to unsettle anyone. But it's not the architecture that keeps me awake at night. It's the things I've seen, heard, and felt in this place. Things I can't explain. Things that started small but grew into a chain of events that's left me questioning my sanity. It began on a quiet October evening, my first month on the job. I was leading A late-night haunted tour. A group of 10 wide-eyed tourists trailing me through the dim halls. The house creaks constantly, old wood settling, the guides always say, but that night the air felt heavier. We were in the grand ballroom, its massive fireplace cold and dark. I was explaining the legend of Clyde, the ghostly caretaker some claim to see tinkering in the basement or by this very hearth. No one knows who he was, I said, my voice echoing, but guests have seen a man in white overalls and a boater hat working as if the house is still under construction. A woman in the group laughed nervously. Do you believe in him, Clara? I shrugged, keeping it light. I believe the house has stories. But as I spoke, a faint clink sounded from the fireplace like metal on stone. Everyone froze. I forced a smile, assuming a loose brick or draft. See? The house loves to play tricks. We moved on, but I glanced back. The fireplace was empty, shadowed. I told myself it was nothing. The next week, it happened again. Same tour, same ballroom. This time, the clink was louder, followed by a low scrape, like something heavy being dragged. The group exchanged uneasy looks. A man in a baseball cap whispered, "Is that part of the tour?" I shook my head, my heart pounding. I shone my flashlight into the hearth, nothing but ash and soot. Yet the sound lingered in my ears, as if the house itself was listening. By November, I started noticing smaller things. Alone in the staff room, I'd hear footsteps pacing the hallway outside, only to find it empty. Cabinet doors in the kitchen, locked at night, would be ajar by morning. Once, while prepping for a tour, I felt a tug on my sleeve, gentle but firm. I spun around expecting a coworker. No one was there. My arm prickled with goosebumps, but I brushed it off. Old houses, I told myself. Imagination. Then came the night in the Daisy bedroom. It's one of the mansion's creepiest spots, named for its floral stained glass windows. Sarah Winchester herself slept there, and some guests claimed to feel a presence at the foot of the bed. I was guiding a small group, the air thick with that musty, ancient smell of untouched wood. As I recounted Sarah's story, her endless building to outrun some unseen curse, a woman gasped. "Who's that?" she whispered, pointing to the corner. I turned, expecting a shadow or a trick of the light. But there, just for a second, was a figure. A man in white overalls, his face obscured by a boater hat. He stood motionless, a wheelbarrow at his feet. My breath caught. The group murmured, some stepping back. I blinked, and he was gone. The corner was empty, the air still. "Just the house's charm," I stammered, my voice shaking. But I saw it. We all did. After that, the incidents grew frequent. On tours, I'd hear whispers behind me, faint but clear, calling my name. "Clara." The voice was soft, almost pleading, but no one in the group ever admitted to speaking. Once, in the basement, my flashlight flickered off without warning. When it snapped back on, the beam caught a glimpse of something, a silhouette at the end of the corridor, gone before I could focus. My group started noticing things too, orbs in their photos, cold spots in rooms, the faint hum of music from nowhere. The third floor was the worst. It's a maze of narrow halls and dead-end rooms, rarely used for tours after dark. One night, I was sent to check a locked door reported open. The air up there was stifling, the silence oppressive. As I reached the door, I heard it, a low murmur, like voices arguing behind the wood. My hand hovered over the knob. "Hello?" I called, my voice thin. The murmuring stopped. I turned the knob, expecting resistance. It swung open easily, revealing an empty room, dust motes swirling in my flashlight's beam. But the air felt wrong, charged, like someone had just left. I stopped going to the third floor alone after that. Other guides shared similar stories. One, a veteran named Tom, refused to work night shifts anymore. "Something's up there," he muttered. "It watches you." He'd felt a hand tap his shoulder once, only to find no one behind him. Another guide, Emily, swore she saw a child's shadow dart across a hallway giggling, though no kids were on the tour. By spring, I was jumpy, always looking over my shoulder. The house felt alive, its walls pulsing with some restless energy. I started keeping a journal, noting every oddity. The wheelbarrow creaking in the basement when no one was there, the scent of smoke in rooms with no fireplaces, the way mirrors seemed to fog up when I passed. My co-workers thought I was paranoid, but I knew what I'd seen, what I'd felt. The breaking point came in June. I was leading a midnight tour, a group of thrill-seekers eager for scares. We were in the seance room, a small windowless chamber where Sarah supposedly spoke to spirits. The air was thick, the candlelight casting jagged shadows. I was mid-sentence when the candle snuffed out. Complete darkness. The group gasped. Someone giggled nervously. Then from the corner came a whisper. "Clara," clear as day, right in my ear. I froze, my skin crawling. The group didn't hear it. They were too busy muttering about the candle, but I did. And then a tug. Not on my sleeve this time, but my hair, sharp and deliberate. I screamed, stumbling back. The group panicked, their flashlights swinging wildly. "What's wrong?" someone shouted. I couldn't answer. My scalp stung, my heart hammering. One of the guests relit the candle, its glow revealing nothing but the empty room. But I felt it, eyes on me, unseen, unblinking. I rushed the group out, ending the tour early. They thought it was part of the show. It wasn't. That night, I sat in my car in the parking lot, too shaken to drive. I flipped through my journal, pages filled with scribbled accounts of footsteps, whispers, shadows. I realized something. The incidents weren't random. They were escalating, building toward something. The house wasn't just haunted. It was aware, and it knew my name. I wanted to quit, but I couldn't. The mansion had a pull, like it wasn't done with me. So I kept working, avoiding the third floor, the basement, the seance room. But the house didn't care. Last week, during a daytime tour, a guest's camera caught something. A blurry figure in the background of a hallway shot, wearing a boater hat. They showed me, excited. I felt sick. It was him, Clyde, or whatever he was. Tonight, as I lock up after another tour, the house is quiet. Too quiet. The air hums with that familiar weight, like it's holding its breath. I check the doors, my flashlight shaking in my hand. As I pass the grand ballroom, I hear it, a faint clink, then a scrape. My stomach drops. I don't look back. I can't. But I feel it following me, step for step, down the endless halls. I don't know what the Winchester Mystery House wants from me. Maybe it's Sarah, still building her maze. Maybe it's Clyde, forever tending to a home that never rests. Or maybe it's something else, something older, woven into the walls themselves. All I know is I'm part of its story now, and I'm not sure I'll ever get out. Story 12. The Haunting of LaLaurie Mansion. My name is Clara, and I never believed in ghosts. Not until I moved to New Orleans, chasing a job as a freelance photographer. The French Quarter, with its vibrant streets and iron balconies, felt like a dream, until I found myself living next to the LaLaurie mansion. That's when the nightmares began. It was August, and the air was thick with humidity. I'd rented a tiny apartment on Royal Street, right beside the infamous mansion at 1140. The rent was suspiciously cheap, but I didn't ask questions. The landlord, a wiry man with darting eyes, handed me the keys and muttered, "Don't linger near the big house at night." I laughed it off. I'd heard the stories, Madame LaLaurie's cruelty, the fire in 1834, the tortured souls in the attic. Ghost tales were just tourist bait, I thought. But the first night in my new place, I felt watched. The first night, I was unpacking my camera gear when I heard it, a faint moan, like wind through a cracked window. I froze, straining to listen. It came again, low and guttural, from the direction of the mansion next door. I glanced out my window, but the mansion's shutters were closed, its wrought iron facade glowing faintly under the streetlights. Nothing moved. I told myself it was the old building settling, or maybe a stray cat. But sleep didn't come easy that night. Every creak in my apartment made my heart jump. The next morning, I met my neighbor, Miss Evelyn, an elderly woman who'd lived on Royal Street for decades. She saw me eyeing the mansion and leaned close. "You hear anything last night?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, then nodded. Her eyes narrowed. "It's them, the ones she heard. They never left." I forced a smile, but her words stuck with me. That evening, I set up my tripod to photograph the quarter's architecture. The mansion's balcony caught my eye. Its intricate ironwork was perfect for a moody shot. As I adjusted my lens, I noticed something odd in the viewfinder. A shadow flickered on the second-floor balcony like someone pacing. I lowered the camera, squinting. The balcony was empty, but when I checked the photo later, a blurry humanoid shape stood where I'd seen the shadow. My stomach churned. I deleted the image, telling myself it was a trick of the light. The second encounter. A week later, I woke to footsteps, not in my apartment, but outside, slow, deliberate steps in the mansion's upper balcony. I grabbed my phone and peered through my curtains. The balcony was deserted, but the sound continued, a rhythmic shuffle that stopped abruptly. Then came a new noise, chains clinking softly as if dragged across stone. My breath caught. I remembered the stories of LaLaurie's victims, chained in the attic. I backed away from the window, my heart pounding. The next day, I couldn't shake the unease. I wandered the quarter, hoping to clear my head, but every alley seemed to whisper. Tour guides led groups past the mansion, recounting its horrors. I overheard one say, "People hear cries from the attic, even now." I wanted to scoff, but the memory of those chains stopped me. That night, I stayed up, camera in hand, watching the mansion. Around 2 a.m., a light flickered behind the second-floor curtains. The mansion was empty. I'd seen the owners leave days ago. I snapped a photo, my hand shaking. The image showed a faint glow, like a candle, but no source. I started avoiding my apartment at night, working late at coffee shops. But the mansion's presence followed me. I'd catch glimpses of shadows in my peripheral vision or feel a sudden chill, even in the sweltering heat. Miss Evelyn noticed my pale face one morning. "You're feeling it, aren't you?" she said. "The dread. It's the house. It watches." I didn't argue. I was starting to believe her. The third incident. By September, I was a wreck. Sleep came in fits, haunted by dreams of dark attics and blood-stained walls. One night, I woke to a new sound, A child's cry, faint but unmistakable, coming from the mansion's basement level. I stumbled to my window, clutching my phone. The street was silent, but the cry came again, sharp and desperate. I called the police, babbling about a child in trouble. They checked the mansion and found nothing. "Old houses make noises," the officer said, but his partner looked uneasy, glancing at the mansion's darkened windows. I couldn't let it go. I started researching the mansion's history, digging through old newspapers and ghost tour websites. The stories were consistent: moans, footsteps, cries. One account from 1894 chilled me. A tenant murdered in the house, his last words about sprites haunting him. Nothing was stolen, and the killer was never found. I wondered if the house itself was the killer. That night, I set up my camera outside the mansion, aiming at the basement windows. I didn't expect to catch anything, but I needed to try. At 3 a.m., my motion sensor beeped. I reviewed the footage, my heart in my throat. A shadowy figure moved past the basement window, too tall, too thin to be human. Its limbs seemed to bend unnaturally, and it paused as if staring at the camera. The footage cut to static. When I checked the memory card, it was blank. The breaking point. I was done. I started packing to move, but the mansion wouldn't let me go. The night before I planned to leave, I woke to a crushing weight on my chest. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. In the corner of my room, a figure stood, tall, shrouded in darkness, its eyes glinting like oil. It whispered my name, its voice a rasp of chains and pain. I screamed and it vanished. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, I grabbed my bags and ran. Miss Evelyn saw me and shook her head. "You can't outrun it," she said. "The house mocks you." I didn't care. I left New Orleans that day, vowing never to return. But the mansion followed me. In my new apartment, hundreds of miles away, I still hear footsteps at night. Chains clink in my dreams. And sometimes, when I develop my photos, I see shadows that shouldn't be there, watching, waiting, whispering my name.